I always believed marriages ended with screaming matches or tearful confessions in dimly lit living rooms. I never imagined the end would arrive on a rainy Tuesday morning on the 40th floor of a Seattle glass skyscraper over a cup of complimentary espresso. A smiling stranger handed me a pastry, pointed to a silver picture frame on her desk, and proudly introduced the man I had been married to for the past 7 years. Hello. Dear listeners of Violet Revenge Stories, we are so grateful for your continued support. Unfortunately, YouTube has recently disabled our monetization, leaving us without the budget to keep the channel running. If you find today's story engaging, please consider supporting us with just $1 so we can pay our hardworking team to cover their living expenses and continue creating these stories for you. You can donate by scanning the PayPal QR code on the screen or clicking the PayPal link in the description or the pinned comment of this video. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Melody Walker. I am 34 years old, and my life has always been defined by structure. As a structural engineering consultant, my entire career is built on identifying fractures, calculating load-bearing capacities, and predicting exactly when a foundation will give way. I assess stability for a living. Yet, on that rainy Tuesday morning, I walked into the sleek, ultra-modern headquarters of Etheria Skyline Dynamics in Seattle, completely unaware that the foundation of my own reality was about to collapse. The firm had contracted me to evaluate a highly anticipated eco-resort project. The lobby was a vast expanse of polished marble and cold steel. Reflecting the gray clouds rolling over the city, I checked in at the front desk and was promptly escorted to the executive wing on the 40th floor. My task was straightforward. I needed to review the preliminary architectural blueprints and coordinate with the interior design team to ensure their aesthetic visions did not compromise the structural integrity of the massive complex. I was introduced to the director of interior design, a woman named Clara Montgomery. Clara was the kind of woman who effortlessly commanded a room, not with authority, but with an overwhelming, radiant warmth. She had a flawless smile, perfectly styled hair, and an energy that felt entirely out of place in a sterile corporate environment. "It is so wonderful to finally meet you, Melody," Clara said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "We have been waiting for someone with your expertise to help us pull this massive vision together. Please, come into my office. Let me make you a cup of coffee while we go over the floor plans." I followed her into a spacious corner office flooded with natural light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. The room was meticulously decorated, a testament to her profession, with fabric swatches and color palettes neatly organized on a drafting table. "Espresso all right?" she asked, already turning toward a high-end machine on a sleek side console. "That sounds perfect, thank you," I replied, taking a seat in a plush velvet chair opposite her main desk. As the machine whirred to life, my eyes naturally wandered across her workspace. It was a habit born of my profession, taking in the details, analyzing the layout, looking for anomalies. That was when the anomaly found me. My gaze drifted to the corner of her pristine desk and locked onto a silver picture frame. Time, which had been moving at its usual, predictable pace, suddenly ground to a violent halt. The ambient noise of the office, the hissing of the espresso machine, the gentle patter of rain against the glass, all of it vanished into a deafening vacuum. Inside the glass frame was an engagement photo, a stunning, professionally lit portrait of a couple deeply in love. The woman was Clara, looking over her shoulder with an expression of pure, unadulterated joy. The man kissing her cheek was Julian Vance, my husband of 7 years. My body stiffened, turning as rigid as the steel columns I inspected daily. My lungs forgot how to draw air. My heart felt as though it had been submerged in freezing water. I stared at the man in the photograph, searching for any possible explanation, any bizarre coincidence, a twin brother I never knew about, an elaborate prank. But there was no mistaking the sharp jawline, the distinct curve of his brow, or the way his dark hair fell slightly to the left. What solidified the nightmare, locking it firmly into reality, was the suit he was wearing. It was a custom-tailored charcoal gray suit. I knew the exact thread count of that fabric, I knew the precise cut of the lapels. I knew it because I had picked it out, paid for it, and gifted it to Julian for his 35th birthday just 6 months ago. He had told me he needed something sharp for his investor pitches. He wore the suit I bought him to take engagement photos with another woman. "Here you go," Clara chimed, turning back around with 2 steaming cups. She set one down on a coaster in front of me and took her seat. She followed the trajectory of my frozen stare. Her eyes landed on the silver frame, and that flawless, radiant smile returned, blinding in its innocence. "Oh, you are looking at my fiancé," Clara said, her voice dripping with pride and affection. "We just took those last month. He is quite handsome, is he not? We are preparing to host our wedding next spring." Panic, raw and suffocating, clawed at my throat. Every instinct I possessed screamed at me to flip the desk, to shatter the glass frame, to demand answers, to tear the room apart. I wanted to scream that the man she was calling her fiancé had kissed me goodbye that very morning in our kitchen. Instead, the cold, analytical side of my brain took control, the side that assesses structural damage without emotion. I realized in that split second that reacting would give away the only advantage I had: knowledge. I forced my facial muscles to relax. I commanded my breathing to steady. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat and painted a polite, convincingly warm smile across my face. "He is very handsome," I said, my voice steady, betraying absolutely nothing of the devastation tearing me apart inside. "Congratulations. How long have the two of you been together?" Clara took a delicate sip of her coffee, her eyes sparkling with the kind of happiness that only comes from absolute certainty in a relationship. "Thank you," she beamed. "We have been dating for 3 years. It feels like an eternity, but also like no time has passed at all. 3 years. The words echoed in my mind like a death knell. 3 years. I nodded, maintaining my pleasant facade, but internally, the math was devastating. We had been married for 7 years. Clara giving me this cheerful confession meant that for nearly half of my marriage, the life I thought I was living was nothing more than a meticulously crafted, perfect lie. I was sitting across from the woman who had unknowingly stolen my future, drinking her coffee, while my husband played us both. The drive home was a blur of gray traffic and white knuckles gripping the steering wheel. By the time I turned the key in the lock of our Seattle townhouse, I had completely compartmentalized the devastation. I stepped into the warm foyer, hung my wet trench coat on the rack, and inhaled the familiar scent of roasting garlic and fresh herbs. Julian was cooking. My husband, the man who was actively planning a spring wedding with another woman, was standing in our kitchen wearing a navy blue apron, casually tossing an arugula salad as if the world had not just ended. "Hey, honey," he called out, his voice smooth, rich, and entirely relaxed. "How was the new site assessment?" I walked into the kitchen, leaned my hip against the cool marble island, and forced the corners of my mouth to rise into a tired but affectionate smile. "It was fine," I lied effortlessly. "Just the usual preliminary inspections. The foundation seems solid enough, but there is a lot of ground to cover before we can move forward." He smiled warmly, sliding a plate of perfectly roasted chicken across the counter toward me. "I am sure you will handle it perfectly. You always do." We sat down at the dining table to eat. I watched him. I really, truly watched him. It was absolutely terrifying how seamlessly he wore the skin of a devoted, loving partner. Between bites of dinner, Julian launched into a well-rehearsed, passionate monologue about his independent real estate venture. He spoke convincingly about pulling all-nighters, grinding through endless investor meetings, and sacrificing his health and sleep to build a better future for the two of us. "The capital is finally coming together. Melody," he said, reaching across the table to affectionately squeeze my hand. His palm was warm against my freezing skin. "I know I have been a little distant lately, but this new development is going to secure us financially for life. Just give me a little more time, and it will all pay off." "I believe you," I replied, squeezing his hand back. My voice was steady, perfectly modulated, devoid of any tremor. He had absolutely no idea that I knew exactly what he was building, and exactly who he was building it for. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the townhouse was suffocatingly quiet. Julian's deep, rhythmic breathing filtered through the cracked door of the master bedroom. I slipped out from beneath our heavy duvet, moving with the silent, practiced precision of a shadow, and crept down the dark hallway to his home office. I bypassed the sleek, modern desktop sitting on his desk. Looking at our joint bank statements would be an exercise in futility. Julian was far too meticulous to leave an obvious paper trail in the accounts I openly monitored. Instead, I opened the bottom drawer of his heavy oak filing cabinet and pulled out his old, battered laptop. He had abandoned it a year ago, convinced the hard drive was irreparably corrupted. He had conveniently forgotten that he was married to an engineer who understood complex systems, structural architecture, and deep data retrieval. Sitting on the cold hardwood floor, I plugged the dead machine directly into a wall outlet. I connected an encrypted external drive I had purchased in cash on the drive home, ensuring I completely bypassed our home wireless network. It took 45 agonizing minutes of running a manual recovery protocol in the dark. Every creak of the house settling sounded like approaching footsteps. Every passing car headlight sweeping across the window blinds made my heart hammer violently against my ribs. Finally, the screen flickered to life, and the hidden directories began to populate. The harsh blue light of the monitor illuminated the staggering depths of his betrayal. Line by line, I unearthed a complex web of wire transfers leading to a shell entity called Vance Holdings. It was registered under his middle name, Edward. For the past 2 years, Julian had been systematically and aggressively siphoning funds from our high-yield savings and long-term investment accounts. He masked the daily and weekly withdrawals as consulting fees, software licenses, and legal retainers for his fictitious startup. This was not just missing pocket change or hidden credit card debt. We were looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars completely vaporized from our marital estate. I double-clicked a folder labeled with a date from exactly 8 months ago. Inside was a high-resolution scanned receipt from an exclusive jeweler located in the Diamond District. The item description was painfully specific. It listed one 2-carat emerald-cut diamond set in a custom platinum band. I closed my eyes tightly, pressing the heels of my hands against my eyelids as the vivid image of Clara's hand flashed in my mind. He had purchased her engagement ring using the money we had painstakingly saved for our own early retirement. Further down the directory, the final puzzle piece clicked into place. I found the massive wire transfer confirmations for the Etheria Skyline Dynamics project. Julian had used our shared marital assets to pay the exorbitant land deposit for the very eco-resort Clara was designing. He was literally funding his new life with his mistress using the financial foundation I had spent 7 years helping him build. The next morning, I left the house early under the guise of an emergency site inspection. I did not dare use my personal cell phone or my work laptop. I walked 3 blocks in the drizzling rain to an independent coffee shop, connected to their public network through a secure virtual private network on a brand new burner phone, and placed a call to a woman I had researched extensively during the sleepless hours before dawn. Evelyn Davis was widely known as the most ruthless divorce attorney in King County. She was a financial shark who specialized in high-asset dissolutions and corporate fraud. I sat in the isolated corner booth of the busy cafe and laid out the facts. I told her about the engagement photo, the hidden shell company, the stolen savings, the diamond ring, and the land deposit. I spoke rapidly, stripping away the raw emotion, delivering the data like a sterile structural damage report. Evelyn listened in complete silence. When I finished, her response was sharp, calculated, and decisive. "Melody, you have the ultimate element of surprise," Evelyn instructed, her voice crackling slightly over the encrypted line. "Right now, he thinks he is the smartest man in the room. We need to keep him believing that. If you confront him today, he will panic, move the rest of the money into offshore accounts, and destroy the physical evidence." "So, what exactly do you want me to do?" I asked, gripping the paper coffee cup until the cardboard buckled under my fingers. "I want you to be the perfect wife," Evelyn said coldly. "Smile at him, make his coffee, ask him how his day was. Give me exactly 3 weeks to subpoena the hidden accounts and trace every single dime he stole. We are not just going to divorce him. Melody, we are going to completely dismantle him. But to do that, you need to live with the enemy a little while longer without letting your mask slip. I hung up the phone and stared out the window at the morning rush hour traffic. The thought of going back to that house, of letting him touch me, of listening to his lies, made me physically sick to my stomach. But I was an engineer. I knew better than anyone that tearing down a massive, corrupt structure required immense patience, mathematical precision, and finding the exact stress points to place the explosives. I stood up, threw my coffee in the trash, and prepared myself to play the role of a lifetime. The days that followed dissolved into a waking nightmare, a suffocating loop of meticulously calculated performances. If acting like the perfect wife in the evenings was draining, pretending to be a supportive colleague to my husband's oblivious fiancé during the day was an entirely different class of psychological torture. I spent my mornings trapped in the brightly lit conference rooms of Etheria Skyline Dynamics, forced to breathe in the overwhelming scent of Clara's floral perfume, while she seamlessly wove Julian into every professional discussion. She possessed an agonizing habit of oversharing, casually dropping intimate details of their relationship into the spaces between structural load calculations and aesthetic material choices. Julian is just so particular about natural light, Clara hummed one afternoon, tracing her manicured fingernail along a cross-section of the resort's grand atrium. He always says a room should feel like an extension of the sky. He actually woke me up at 5 a.m. last Sunday just to show me the sunrise from his balcony. That man is an absolute romantic. I gripped my graphite pencil so tightly I felt the wood begin to splinter against my palm. Last Sunday at 5 a.m, Julian had told me he was stepping out to the gym to clear his head before a major conference call. I forced a tight, close-lipped smile and nodded at her architectural rendering, letting the pencil drop softly onto the table before I snapped it in half. "It is a beautiful design, Clara," I managed to say, my voice carefully modulated to sound perfectly even. "The integration with the cliffside is ambitious." "Oh, it was all Julian's brilliance," she beamed, completely missing the tension radiating from my posture. She eagerly unfurled a massive topographical map across the glass table. "He personally scouted and negotiated the purchase of this exact parcel of land. Everyone else thought the terrain was far too challenging. But Julian saw the vision immediately. He practically stole it for the price." I leaned over the table, my professional instincts temporarily overriding my nausea, as my eyes scanned the tight, undulating contour lines representing the cliff's aggressive slope. A cold knot formed in the pit of my stomach. The grade was incredibly steep, angling downward toward a coastal drop-off. For a multi-tiered eco-resort utilizing heavy steel and reinforced concrete, the foundational requirements on a slope like that would be astronomically expensive, assuming the earth beneath it was even viable. That evening, while Julian was supposedly at a late networking dinner, I locked myself in my home office and accessed the municipal geotechnical database. Using my secure credentials as a licensed structural engineer, I pulled the public land surveys and historical soil composition reports for the exact coordinates Clara had shown me. I spent 3 hours reading through decades of geographical data, and the further I read, the more the blood drained from my face. The land was not a hidden gem. It was a ticking time bomb. The reports detailed a shallow layer of topsoil sitting precariously over fractured shale and expansive clay. The area had a documented history of severe subterranean water runoff, making the soil highly susceptible to liquefaction and slope failure during the region's heavy rainy season. In plain terms, the land was a catastrophic landslide waiting to happen. It was fundamentally unstable, completely lacking the solid bedrock necessary to anchor a massive commercial development. No sane city planner or independent safety inspector would ever approve a multi-story commercial permit on that specific plot without demanding tens of millions of dollars in deep foundation anchoring and retaining walls, which I knew from his stolen financial records Julian absolutely could not afford. A horrifying question slammed into my mind. If the land was legally unbuildable, How did Julian secure the preliminary zoning and safety approvals necessary to pitch this project to Etheria Skyline Dynamics and their wealthy investors? I retrieved the encrypted hard drive containing the data I had cloned from his old laptop. My hands were shaking so violently, I struggled to type in the decryption password. I bypassed the financial folders I had previously investigated and dug deeper into a directory labeled with municipal zoning codes. I found a subfolder containing the environmental impact reports and structural safety waivers submitted to the City Planning Commission. I opened the master PDF document. I stared at the glowing screen until my vision blurred, my lungs forgetting how to process oxygen. There, at the bottom of a completely falsified structural integrity report declaring the cliffside plot safe for immediate commercial excavation, was a signature. It was my signature. Beside my forged handwriting was a perfect, high-resolution digital replica of my official state professional engineer seal, complete with my unique license number. The sheer magnitude of his malice hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the breath completely out of my chest. Julian was not just cheating on me. He was not just stealing my life savings to fund his mistress's dream project. He was actively, deliberately framing me. He had weaponized my credentials, my hard-earned reputation, and my legal liability to bypass the city's strict safety regulations. If they built that resort, and the fractured shale gave way under the immense weight of the concrete, the entire structure would slide down the cliffside, taking hundreds of lives with it. And when the state investigators sifted through the rubble to find out who approved the fatal construction, they would find my professional seal stamped on the documents. Julian was setting me up to take the fall. He was arranging for me to face catastrophic civil lawsuits, the total revocation of my engineering license, and highly probable criminal charges for extreme negligence and manslaughter. He was perfectly willing to send his wife to federal prison for decades just to ensure his fraudulent empire survived and his mistress got her dream wedding. The profound sorrow and heartbreak I had felt over the loss of my marriage instantly evaporated, incinerated by a sudden, blinding inferno of pure, unadulterated rage. I was no longer a grieving wife. I was a woman staring at the blueprint of her own destruction, and I decided in that dark and quiet room that I was going to burn his entire world to the ground before he ever got the chance to strike the match. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen blinds, casting long, fractured shadows across the granite island where Julian sat sipping his black coffee. He casually loosened his silk tie, projecting the image of an exhausted but dedicated entrepreneur. I stood by the sink, washing a single coffee mug, watching his reflection in the dark glass of the oven door. The raw, burning rage I had discovered in his office had crystallized over the past few days into something cold, heavy, and infinitely sharp. "It is finally happening," Julian sighed, a perfectly rehearsed note of weariness in his voice. "We secured the grand ballroom at the Olympic Fairmont for this Friday night. It is the final investor showcase for the eco-resort. If we close these capital commitments, the foundation work starts next month." He stood up, walking over to wrap his arms around my waist from behind. I forced my muscles to remain completely relaxed, suppressing the violent shudder that threatened to ripple through my spine as his chin rested on my shoulder. "I would absolutely love for you to be there, Melody," he murmured into my hair, his tone dripping with fake regret. "But honestly, you would be miserable. It is just going to be a closed-door, mind-numbing marathon with aggressive financial directors analyzing amortization tables and zoning liabilities. It is strictly suits and spreadsheets." "That does sound exhausting," I agreed smoothly, turning around to offer him a gentle, supportive smile. "You go. Secure your funding. We can celebrate when you have the final contracts in hand." "You are the best," he smiled, pressing a quick kiss to my forehead before grabbing his leather briefcase. He was so arrogant, so completely convinced of his own superior intellect, that he failed to realize how small his world actually was. He assumed my professional sphere at the firm never intersected with his personal fantasy. He was wrong. The very next afternoon, I was reviewing load-bearing calculations in the Etheria Skyline Dynamics conference room when Clara burst through the glass doors. She was practically vibrating with excitement, holding a thick, cream-colored envelope embossed with gold foil. "Melody, you absolutely must clear your schedule for this Friday night," Clara announced, dropping the envelope directly onto my blueprints. "Julian and I are hosting the official launch gala for the resort at the Fairmont. It is going to be incredibly glamorous. Champagne towers, a live string quartet, the works." I looked down at the elegant invitation, reading the cursive font that proudly displayed his name alongside hers. The absolute audacity of it all was almost poetic. "I know it is somewhat short notice," Clara continued, her eyes wide and pleading, "but you have been so instrumental in helping me visualize the architectural integrity of this space. I would be genuinely honored if you attended as my personal guest of honor. We are celebrating the biggest night of Julian's career, and I want you there." I looked up from the gold foil, meeting her bright, naive gaze. The universe was handing me the perfect stage, fully illuminated and filled with the exact audience Julian desperately needed to impress. "I would not miss it for the world, Clara," I replied, a slow, genuine smile spreading across my face. "I think it is going to be a night no one will ever forget." The countdown had officially begun. I requested 3 days of personal leave from my firm, citing a sudden family emergency. I spent every waking hour of those 72 hours locked in a secure conference room with Evelyn, my attorney. We operated with the surgical precision of a military strike team. We compiled 30 identical, heavy physical dossiers bound in thick black leather. Inside each folder was a perfectly organized table of contents leading to the damning evidence. Section 1 contained the certified banking statements showing the exact trajectory of the stolen funds from our joint savings into his shell company. Section 2 held the high-resolution prints of his forged safety documents bearing my stolen engineering seal. Section 3, the grand finale, was a notarized, state-certified copy of our legal marriage certificate, proving that Julian had been legally bound to me for the past 7 years. While Evelyn finalized the legal traps, I systematically dismantled my presence in our townhouse. I withdrew a significant sum of cash from a separate personal account Julian did not know about and secured a short-term lease on a high-security apartment downtown, over 3 afternoons. While Julian was away at meetings, I packed my most crucial documents, family heirlooms, and enough professional attire to start over. I moved like a ghost in my own home, leaving the closets looking perfectly untouched while hollowing out the core of my existence there. Friday evening arrived with a chilling calm. The storm outside had cleared, leaving the Seattle skyline sharp and glittering against the twilight. Julian stood by the front door, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored tuxedo. He looked handsome, powerful, and completely oblivious to the blade resting against his throat. "I am sorry to leave you alone on a Friday, honey," he said, pulling me into a brief embrace. I smelled the faint trace of Clara's floral perfume clinging to his lapel. "I promise I will make it up to you this weekend. Maybe we can drive down to the coast. Good luck tonight, Julian," I told him, looking directly into his eyes. "Give them a presentation they will remember." He flashed a brilliant, confident smile and walked out the door. I listened to the heavy click of the deadbolt locking into place. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, the submissive wife he thought he had left behind ceased to exist. I walked calmly into our master bedroom and opened the large garment bag I had hidden in the back of the closet. I unzipped it, revealing a stunning, floor-length crimson-red dress. It was bold, unapologetic, and the exact color of a warning sign. I slipped it on, applied a striking coat of dark lipstick, and looked at my reflection in the full-length mirror. I was ready to burn his empire to ashes. The heavy brass doors of the Olympic Fairmont Grand Ballroom stood open, spilling warm, golden light into the quiet corridor. I paused for just a fraction of a second, letting the polished mahogany beneath my heels ground me. The heavy black leather dossiers were securely stacked on a rolling cart waiting in the wings, entrusted to Evelyn, who stood cloaked in the shadows of the coat check. I took one deep breath, smoothed the fabric of my crimson dress, and walked into the lion's den. The sheer opulence of the event was staggering. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the vaulted ceilings, casting a brilliant glow over a sea of tailored tuxedos and expensive evening gowns. A live string quartet played a sophisticated symphony in the corner, nearly drowned out by the clinking of champagne flutes and the low, confident hum of Seattle's wealthiest venture capitalists and high-ranking city officials. Waitstaff in crisp white uniforms circulated with silver trays of caviar and imported truffles. My entrance did not go unnoticed. The bold red of my gown cut through the sea of conservative black and navy like a blaring siren. Heads turned. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Whispers trailed my path as I slowly, deliberately weaved my way through the thickest part of the crowd. I found them near the center of the room, standing beneath the largest chandelier. Julian was holding court, surrounded by a tight circle of silver-haired financial backers and aggressive banking executives. He looked completely in his element, flashing that million-dollar smile, radiating charisma and false promises. His left hand was casually slipped into his pocket, while his right hand was tightly intertwined with Clara's. She looked absolutely ethereal in a champagne-colored silk dress, laughing lightly at something an investor had just said. The 2-carat emerald-cut diamond on her finger caught the light of the chandeliers, sparkling violently with the hundreds of thousands of dollars he had stolen from my future. A sharp chime rang through the room as someone tapped a silver spoon against a crystal glass. The low murmur of the crowd quieted, and the sea of guests naturally parted, forming a wide center aisle leading straight to a raised stage adorned with lavish floral arrangements and a sleek acrylic podium. An announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, praising the visionary mind behind the Etheria Eco Resort, welcoming Julian to the stage to present the final phase of development. The room erupted into enthusiastic, thunderous applause. Julian kissed Clara's cheek, whispered something in her ear that made her blush deeply, and confidently strode up the carpeted steps. He stood behind the podium, gripping the edges, soaking in the admiration. He looked out over the crowd, his chest puffed with unearned pride, ready to deliver his carefully rehearsed manifesto to seal the multi-million-dollar deals. That was my cue. As the applause began to die down, I stepped squarely into the center aisle, the rhythmic, sharp click of my heels against the polished floorboards cut through the fading clapping. I did not rush. I walked with the slow, measured, and terrifying intent of an apex predator that has finally cornered its prey. The investors lining the aisle instinctively took a step back, creating a clear, unobstructed path between me and the man on the stage. Julian leaned into the microphone, his lips parting to speak his opening line. He casually scanned the front rows, his gaze sweeping over the audience with supreme arrogance. And then, he saw me. The transformation was instantaneous and violent. The charismatic, glowing smile did not just fade, it shattered entirely. Every ounce of color violently drained from his face, leaving his skin an ashen, sickly gray. His jaw dropped slightly, his eyes bulging as if he were staring at a ghost rising from the floorboards. The confident grip he held on the edges of the acrylic podium turned into a desperate, white-knuckled clutch, as if the floor beneath him had suddenly vanished into a sinkhole. He was completely paralyzed. His breathing stopped, his mind completely short-circuiting as the reality of my presence destroyed his meticulously crafted illusion. "Julian!" Clara's voice broke the heavy silence. She had followed his terrified gaze. When she spotted me standing in the aisle, her face lit up with genuine, innocent delight, completely blind to the catastrophic reality crashing down around her. She raised her hand and waved enthusiastically. "Melody, you made it! Come up to the front." I offered her a tight, polite nod, my eyes never leaving Julian's panicked, sweating face. I did not stop at the front row. I kept walking. I reached the base of the stage, gripped the brass handrail, and ascended the carpeted steps. The audience was dead silent now, the thick, heavy tension sucking the oxygen out of the massive ballroom. They sensed the electric shift in the atmosphere, the sudden, unnatural terror radiating from the man they had just been applauding. Executives exchanged confused, worried glances. Julian opened his mouth, trying to form a word, a plea, a command, but his throat was completely paralyzed. He stood frozen, trembling violently under the bright stage lights. I walked right up to the podium. I did not scream. I did not cry. I looked him dead in the eyes, reached out, and politely but firmly wrapped my fingers around the sleek black microphone. I pried it out of his trembling hand. He did not fight me. He physically could not move. I turned to face the hundreds of confused, wealthy faces staring up at the stage. The string quartet had completely stopped playing. You could hear a single breath drop in that massive room. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice echoing loudly and clearly through the state-of-the-art sound system, ringing off the vaulted ceilings. "My name is Melody Walker. I know Julian was just about to give a wonderful, inspiring speech detailing the financial brilliance and structural innovation of this ambitious eco-resort. However, there are two minor details he conveniently left off the glossy brochures." I paused, letting the absolute, suffocating silence hang heavy over the crowd. I glanced down at the front row, directly at Clara, whose smile had finally faltered into a mask of pure confusion and dawning dread. Then, I looked back at the sea of investors holding their checkbooks. "First," I continued, my tone sharp, cold, and echoing with absolute finality, "I am Julian's legally married wife, and I have been for the past 7 years. Second, due to the fact that he secretly embezzled our entire life savings to secure the land deposit for this exact project without my knowledge or consent. I am also your involuntary primary financial backer, right on cue." My attorney Evelyn stepped out from the shadows near the coat check and calmly wheeled a heavy brass luggage cart down the center aisle. I gestured toward her. She efficiently distributed the 30 thick black leather dossiers to the primary stakeholders and banking executives seated in the front row. "I highly suggest you open those folders," I said, leaning closer to the microphone. "Inside the first section, you will find certified bank statements detailing exactly how Julian funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars from my personal marital savings to secure the initial land deposit for this resort. The money he used to court you was stolen." The room erupted into a chaotic, bewildered murmur as the wealthy investors ripped open the folders. But I was not finished. I pulled a small presentation clicker from my clutch and pressed the forward button. The massive projection screen behind me, which was supposed to display beautiful, idealized architectural renderings, suddenly flashed with dense, highly technical geological surveys and topographical heat maps. "What you are looking at right now is the actual, unedited soil composition report for the cliffside property," I announced, raising my voice to cut through the growing panic in the room. "The land is composed of fractured shale and highly expansive clay. It is fundamentally incapable of supporting a multi-story concrete structure. If you build this resort, the entire complex will slide into the ocean during the first heavy rainy season. It is not a lucrative investment. It is a mass casualty event waiting to happen." I pointed directly at Julian. He was visibly shaking, his skin practically translucent under the stage lights, gasping for air as if he were drowning on dry land. "To secure your funding tonight, Julian bypassed the city safety regulations by forging my signature and illegally duplicating my professional engineering seal on the preliminary zoning applications," I stated, delivering the final, fatal blow. "That is not just a zoning violation. That is a multi-million-dollar criminal fraud, and the undeniable proof is sitting in Section 2 of your binders." Clara slowly stood up from her chair in the front row. The champagne glass slipped from her trembling hand and shattered violently against the polished floorboards. She looked up at Julian, her face a heartbreaking mask of absolute horror and profound humiliation. The perfect fairy tale he had sold her was completely annihilated in less than 3 minutes. She walked up the steps to the stage, her breathing ragged and loud. Julian tried to reach out for her, his mouth opening to whisper some pathetic, desperate excuse. Clara did not hesitate. She pulled her arm back and delivered a resounding, vicious slap directly across his face. The sharp crack echoed like a gunshot through the silent ballroom. She turned on her heel, gathered the skirts of her champagne silk dress, and sprinted out of the double doors, sobbing uncontrollably into her hands. Total chaos consumed the ballroom. Wealthy executives were already pulling out their cell phones, aggressively shouting at their legal teams to freeze all asset transfers and kill the contracts immediately. Julian was entirely finished. In the span of a single speech, he was bankrupt, publicly humiliated, and facing the imminent reality of being arrested for federal fraud. I did not stay to watch the police arrive. I calmly walked down the stage steps, navigated through the frantic crowd of screaming investors, and exited the ballroom. As I reached the quiet, deserted marble lobby of the hotel, I heard hurried, desperate footsteps echoing behind me. It was Julian. He collapsed to his knees on the cold floor, grabbing the hem of my crimson dress, tears streaming down his flushed face. He begged me to forgive him, to call off the lawyers, crying that he had made a terrible mistake and just wanted to build an empire for us. I looked down at the pathetic, broken man I once called my husband. I reached into my clutch, pulled out a tightly folded stack of legal documents, and dropped the divorce papers directly onto his lap. I did not shed a single tear. I did not say another word. I turned my back on him and walked out through the revolving glass doors into the cool Seattle night. 9 months later, I stood on the expansive balcony of my newly purchased downtown penthouse. The Seattle skyline stretched out before me, glowing brilliantly under the clear night sky. I took a sip of expensive red wine, enjoying the absolute, unfiltered freedom of my new life. I had aggressively protected my engineering license, reclaimed every single dollar he stole with heavy interest, and watched from afar as Julian was indicted and sentenced to federal prison. He thought he could bury me to build his fraudulent fantasy, but he forgot that I'm a structural engineer. I know exactly how to tear things down, and more importantly, I know exactly how to rebuild. The most ruthless revenge you can ever inflict on those who betray you is simply living a brilliant, unbreakable life after the storm. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. Where are you tuning in from right now? We truly appreciate your time and support. If you enjoyed today's story, please consider helping us with just $1 so our channel can pay the team, help them support their families, and continue creating more amazing stories for you. You can easily do this by scanning the PayPal QR code on the screen or using the PayPal link in the description or the pinned comment. Thank you again, and take care.